it, and eventually, a few years ago, we produced this film, Unrepentant. And it's really just been a long process of learning and, swimming against the stream, if you like, because the opposition from kind of the white society is intensified over the years as we're getting closer to the truth about a lot of these things.
So how does the general public view
all of this stuff?
Yes.
Well, there's still a lot of denial among a lot of white people, naturally, because, you're telling them that these institutions they believed in their whole life have blood on their hands. And that's hard for, like, a churchgoer to think about, but their experience of their church doesn't go beyond their own congregation, and they find it really hard to believe. But I find with a lot of the younger people, there's a lot more openness. Like, to give you an example of that, we often hold vigils and protests, outside the churches that were responsible for these, the Catholic and the Anglican and the United Churches. And most of the people coming by on the street are supportive of us. Even the police, they'll come by and say, wow, I didn't know this stuff. You find a lot of the churchgoers angry that we're there. A lot of the clergy are very angry because they know, a lot of the older clergy know this is all true, and they just get very livid. But, it's kind of like confronting anybody about their wrongdoing. There's a whole phase of denial. But eventually, I think the truth has a great power to persist, and eventually people have to acknowledge what they know is already true. So I actually, in the last 10 years, have seen a lot of change happening. Just this last year, the Prime Minister of Canada gets up in Parliament and apologizes for the residential schools and refers to children who died there and never came back. That would not have happened 2 years ago. And it's because of all of this stuff getting out and our film being out there and more people coming forward to talk. So I can see real change happening, but there's a lot of resistance at the same time, But I think that just shows we're having a real impact.
Did you ever get a time where you thought about giving up and just saying, oh, the heck with it?
Well, yeah, quite regularly, because, I was going through hell in my personal life. I couldn't get work. I'm still under a real blacklist in terms of getting work in Canada. But, the thing that kept me going, first of all, I didn't want the people who did this to me and who did these crimes, I didn't want them to win again. I didn't want them to feel, well, we've crushed another guy who was just trying to, do the right thing. I felt I owed it to my children one day to be able to look them in the eyes and say, to explain to them what had happened. And there was just something I found inside myself that just kept saying, you've got to keep going. You've got to stand by these people who, their lives are being lost every day because of the impact of these residential schools. The suffering is extreme because of this, and somebody's got to take responsibility for it and say, look, we've got to really look at this stuff. So I think it was a combination of all of those things.
Did I lose you?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay. I just was waiting for more.
No, I just paused.
So I just am so amazed that this has been, I guess, swept under the rug again for so long until you were brave enough to step forward and have things kind of turned around now for the Native people in Canada.
Yeah.
For you.
The people I know and work with, definitely it's made a change in their life. And I can give you a really personal example of that. Last March, there was a group of clan mothers and tribal elders from this Squamish Nation in Vancouver. We actually went into the largest Catholic church in Vancouver during a Mass, and we stood there very quietly and respectfully in the church, and we held a banner, and the banner said, all the children need a proper burial. And we were talking about the children who never came back from these schools. And when we were standing there, and most of the people that were there with us were residential school survivors. And one of the fellows, has been a very severe alcoholic. He's tried suicide. He faced incredible torture when he was a little child in one of these Catholic schools, and it's a wonder he survived. But he had been drinking very badly his whole life. And the day after we did that action in the church, he stopped drinking. And what he said to me, he came to me after and he said, it's because of all of us being there together and standing up to these people and telling the truth. I found a power inside myself I didn't know I had. And I said to him, well, it's kind of a lesson there. We learn to heal together. We don't go off to a psychiatrist and get healed individually. We do that together. And when we left that church, beautiful thing that happened. We walked out. The priests were really, of course, very angry, and they called the police. But as we walked out of that church, the whole congregation stood up kind of spontaneously as we walked out. And they were like honoring what we were saying. They were honoring those children. And that's the impact. I think we reach a lot of people because this is a matter of kind of reaching the heart and getting beyond a lot of the talk of money and lawsuits and all that, and just saying, look, if it happened to your child, wouldn't you want to know where they were? Wouldn't you want their remains brought home? That's all we're asking for. And that's resonating with a lot of Canadians now, not just Native people. So I think it's that the way it's helping the survivors. When you find your voice again, you can begin to heal, but not when you're silenced all the time and you silence yourself because of your own pain. So that to me is something I like to hold up to people of, how we can have an impact just by doing that with the people who are suffering,
How many children are missing? Do you have any ideas?
From the residential schools?
From residential schools.
Well, it's somewhere, from my estimation, between 50 and 100,000 who never came back. But don't forget, that was just during the residential school period. A lot of these crimes are carrying on today. And, a lot of people respond by saying, well, this is something in the past, and so we don't have to worry about this. There's nothing we can do about it. It's not true, because to give you an example, in the Native community in British Columbia, children are still disappearing at the same rate. They're still being taken out of Native homes and put into white foster homes. They're still losing their language. There's still the same level of abuse. We've found that there's a number of fairly major pedophile networks operating that are exploiting Native children right off the reserves. And, these crimes are still carrying on. So the disappearances and the deaths, these are things that are still occurring, and that's one of the reasons we're trying to say to people, unless you confront this stuff, it just carries on. Within families that's true. Unless the abuser is confronted, it's just passed on generationally, and people who are abused start becoming the abuser. And that's, what's going on, and this is the urgency of this. It isn't just some history lesson we're talking about.
I hadn't heard that about the current situation.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's a lot of Native women that go missing in one area.
Yes. I'm actually working there's a community task force in Vancouver on missing women, and we've got a list of over 500 Aboriginal women who've disappeared in BC in the last 10 years. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police say that it's only 9. Their official list has 9 women missing. But we know that it's a lot more than that. I mean, in the streets of Vancouver, women working on the street, they go missing all the time, but they're never reported. So this is, back in 1998, UNESCO, the UN agency, issued a report, and it named 3 cities in the world where there was widespread child prostitution and pedophilia going on. And the cities were Rotterdam, Bangkok in Thailand, and Vancouver. And this is because one of the reasons there's such a high Native population, and these are people that are easily exploited, and the kids can go missing and nobody asks any questions. So this is part of the work more and more that I'm doing, showing how it's related to things happening today.
Yes, I know you have a very incredible plan to go forward with in the future. I was reading that a little